So next up in our series on wild teas, sweetgale. A plant with an interesting history, a multitude of uses, and just happens to make a great tasting cup of tea. If you want to learn more about sweetgale, stay tuned. So sweetgale is one of those plants that you don't find all that often. At least I couldn't find it all that often. It took me a while to find it for the first time and identify where it's most likely to grow. But once I have found it more often than I used to find it. Still, it's not something you see all the time. Native to Europe and most of eastern North America, it's closely related to bayberry, which I seem to find all the time, but it's a slightly different plant. So sweetgale, also known as bog myrtle, is in the family of Gale. And, well, I've shown you the plant, but really, let's go see where we can find it in the woods. Stay tuned. All right, I have another in our series on wild tea, and this one is sweetgale. Sweetgale is a plant in the wax myrtle family. It's also known as bog myrtle. And one of the reasons is, you can probably see right down here, it's usually found in boggy areas. You may even find it directly in the water. It will certainly resist flooded areas and survive quite well. And you can see it's an elliptical leaf with fine serrations. Let's hope the camera picked this up. Fine serrations on the edge of the leaf, just towards the tip, kind of spoon-shaped, if you will. The underside is a paler green, very distinct vein down the center, and you can see veins running off the center as well. They're about 2 to 3 inches in length, the leaves that is. They're a paler green than some of the others, such as bayberry, which is a little shinier, brighter green. This is kind of a flat, almost a grayish green. See if there you can probably see the teeth quite well there. So not a lot of teeth, just towards the spoon end of the leaf. And if you look at the branches, they're very woody brown. They follow right up, and they continue like that right out to the leaves, that color. And what you can see growing along the stem are the nutlets, and those nutlets will eventually mature, and the nutlets themselves are edible, and the plant does have medicinal value. It also has quite an interesting history, which we'll go into at a later time. But the characteristic that we're looking for right now, and one of the defining characteristics, if you take a leaf and crush it in your fingers and give it a smell, very fragrant, quite sweet. And we're going to make some tea with this, and we'll talk about its unique history, its medicinal value, and its value as a wild tea. Okay, so as we saw in the video, sweetgale or bog myrtle prefers to grow in wet environments. It's very flood resistant, and it likes an alkaline-based soil. So one of the things I wanted to point out that I don't think I showed in the video were some of the other characteristics that you can help you identify it as sweetgale. So earlier in the spring, they will produce a catkin type of a flower. So it's just a little bit of a droopy flower that's quite green in color. I'll see if I can't insert a picture of that. But towards the latter part of the summer and early into the fall, that's when they'll produce their berries or drupes, if you will. Now they don't look much like a berry or drupe. They look more like a cone. So I have some on the plant that I'm holding right here. Let's see if I can't get in close on those. I think I have a better sample on one of these other branches. Okay, here's a little bit of a better sample. Right up here at the tip, you can see what looks like a little tiny cone, and there's a few more on there. Now these will get a little tiny bit bigger than that, and I think I can insert another picture just to give you a better representation. So if you're looking for something to help you identify this as sweetgale or bog myrtle, those little cones or berries or drupes as they're often referred to, it does help to identify it. One of the biggest things you want to look for, though, is the teeth on the end of the leaf. So let me come in a little closer, and I did point this out in the video as well. You can see quite fine serrations coming up over the top of the spoon portion, if you will, of the leaf. And those fine serrations is one of the identifying marks that differentiates it from its sister plant, bayberry. And I will do a separate video on bayberry and talk about it as a wild tea as well. All right, so sweetgale. has an interesting history. Back in the 16th century, this was one of the more popular things to use in making beer. And the beer at that time was known as gruit, and they used a number of the wild herbs that were locally found, especially in Europe, to make this gruit or this form of beer, and they were eventually replaced by the use of hops. I understand one of the reasons is that the alcohol would extract a component of the sweet gale that could cause headaches if taken to excess. So be conscious of that. If you decide to make any beer from this, which is still a valid use for it, it may cause headaches if you drink too much of it. Of course, that can be said of any alcoholic drink, I guess. Also, our indigenous people, especially on the eastern portion of Canada, use this as a medicinal plant for a number of things. Stomach aches, bronchial ailments, liver problems, pretty much, and of course breathing problems as well. I did say bronchial. Okay, so this is sweet gale. Now, one of the other things that it's used historically for is, again, like a lot of the other ones I've shown you so far, this was one of those substitutes for tea during the American Revolution when the Americans stopped importing British tea because of the excess taxes. It was used again during the Depression as another substitute tea. It's still a valid reason for using sweet gale today. I enjoy making sweet gale tea, half a dozen leaves in a cup of hot water. Again, don't boil it. Just take the water to a boil, take it off boil, put the leaves in. 5 or 10 minutes later, you should have a nice aromatic cup of tea. It can also be used as a condiment for cooking, so you can take the leaves or the catkins or even the fruit, the little cone-like things, and grind them up and put them on things like meat, especially wild meat. It has a really nice flavor. The leaves can also be used as a substitute for bay leaves, so they can be applied in soups or used in anything else you would normally use a bay leaf for. Okay, another excellent wild tea. Easy to find, easy to identify, and it's one of those things, if you're not sure you have it in your hands, grab it, look at it, make sure you've done your research first, of course. Make sure you've compared this, again, multiple resources, not taking just my word for it, but I think you'll find it's quite easy to identify. Take the leaf, crush it in your fingers, smell it. Very aromatic. Quite a nice smell as well. Oh, one other thing that I had forgotten to mention. This is still used today in Scotland, an extract of it, as a fly repellent. I guess it's very effective against mosquitoes and the midges that are very common in the UK. So it can be used here by us as an expedient bug repellent. You take some of the leaves, grab a handful while they're still green, rub them on your arm, and great smell too. They will last. It won't last all that long, but it is effective, at least in the short term, for repelling mosquitoes and black flies. I have used it for that, as well as some of the other plants that we've talked about. It's the aromatic nature, I think, that causes them to repel the bugs. Okay, sweet fern. Let's close this up with a few comments. You know, I really should be starting to refer to this as Bog Myrtle. Sweet gale just has a nicer name sound to it. The reason I should be referring to it as Bog Myrtle is because quite often I say sweet fern when I should be saying sweet gale. So this is sweet gale, not sweet fern. They are related, but they are no way the same plant. They have no comparison look at all. All right, having said all of that, if you've enjoyed this series so far on wild teas, maybe you'll consider subscribing to my channel. I have a few more teas I'm going to be showing you. But in the meantime, get out and explore. Take the path less traveled. It will make all the difference. Bye for now.